Umaga was a once-in-a-lifetime character, a monster heel that had an unforgettable run. It's an honor to present to you on the Wrestling Paradise the final episode of our new series where you will learn the real-life story of the man behind the Samoan Bulldozer, and it may very well surprise you. In the previous episode that you should absolutely watch, we saw how Umaga had a period of terrifying domination after his debut as the Samoan Bulldozer, with prestigious victories against Triple H, Shawn Michaels, and even John Cena. But also how he got suspended in the fall of 2007 and seemed to start losing his momentum. In this new episode, you will learn, among other things, the hard times that Umaga had to go through in 2008 and 2009 that eventually forced WWE to fire him. The amazing opponent he was supposed to have a rivalry with at some point, but also what Jeff Hardy or Roman Reigns said about the human being he was, and even how Vince McMahon reacted to his death. And you will never guess which celebrity recognized Umaga on the plane when he came back from a show in Australia. You are on the Wrestling Paradise, the tragical destiny of the Samoan Bulldozer, Umaga, episode 3. Let's go! Since April 2006, Umaga was a dominant monster, the true successor of his legendary family, who, even if he was no longer undefeated, had some impressive accomplishments, and even took part in the main attraction of one of the most watched WrestleManias of all time. But after being suspended in the fall of 2007, nothing will be the same after his return, both in the ring and backstage. While losses were extremely unusual for him so far, and even more so in a completely clean way, he will lose several times in a row on pay-per-view. Once 100% clean against Triple H at No Mercy, and then Cyber Sunday 2007 when he had just returned. And at Survivor Series, he was the leader of his squad to face Triple H and his guys. And even if I think he was awesome in terms of intensity, looking like an uncontrollable animal and absolutely impressive in the way he destroyed Rey Mysterio, he still lost against Jeff Hardy and the Cerebral Assassin, again in an important match. Personally, I can understand that this suspension has made the officials not want to push the Samoan Bulldozer as much as before, both for the image of the company and because he is probably less reliable in their eyes now. But how is Umaga going to be able to keep any credibility as a dominant monster if he loses on a regular basis? Anyway, despite an honorable 22nd place in the top 500 of the best wrestlers of the year according to the Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazine, the next real highlight of the Samoan will happen during the road to WrestleMania 24. At the Showcase of the Immortals, a clash will be set up between the two weekly shows, Monday Night Raw and SmackDown, to determine which one is the best. And on this occasion, William Regal, the general manager of the Red brand, will be represented by Umaga, or rather Umanga as he calls it. And by the way, about that, Regal revealed that he called him Umanga for the spectators to remember him. And since it sounds like the word humongous, which means huge, I think it was a great idea. At the grandest stage of them all, the Samoan will therefore face the representative of SmackDown, Batista, and unfortunately he loses once again, without any protection in terms of booking, in just over 7 minutes. While in the ring he is clearly no longer the unstoppable monster he was a year earlier, Umaga will also go through hard times in his personal life. While he was in the middle of a European tour in April 2008, his mother, Zilla Fatu, passed away. He is going to take a break for only 2 weeks and then already go back on the road with the WWE. And as if that wasn't enough, a few weeks later, while he had just been drafted to SmackDown with the possibility of really getting back on track after this difficult period since the end of 2007, he will injure his knee in August doing a live event. And it couldn't have happened at a worse moment, since WWE was apparently planning to do a rivalry between Umaga and The Undertaker, which would have been great to give him a spotlight and some importance once again. especially since at that time on SmackDown, the feud between the Dead Man and Edge, which I think was great, was still starting to be a bit too long. So if we put ourselves in his shoes, it's a real crossroads in the life of Umaga. On the screen, he must absolutely regain some momentum and move forward again by now being on the blue brand. And behind the scenes, we can imagine that he must be devastated by everything he is going through, and that the temptation to numb the physical and psychological pain was important. Do you realize how difficult these moments must have been for him? He will then continue to take painkillers to return as soon as possible from his injury, especially since WWE announced that he would have 6 weeks of recovery, which was actually not very realistic since he would not wrestle again before 2009. He will take advantage of this absence of several months to open in October 2008 a food supplement and vitamin shop, Custom Muscle, in Frisco, Texas, with his friend Charlie Haas. There's a real story between the two wrestlers, since not only did they meet in the early 2000s when the two of them were in WWE developmental, but outside the ring, a horrible experience had brought them together in December 2001, when Charlie's brother, Russ, died. Since that moment, they have become very close friends, and it's beautiful that 7 years later, they have started this new adventure together. Will Umaga manage to come back successfully from this injury and be the dominant superstar that he was once again? Make sure to stay until the end of our video to see how his career is going to continue and discover everything that happened in his life before the tragedy that occurred in December 2009. At the beginning of 2009, while WWE was broadcasting vignettes announcing his return, Umaga finally seemed ready to become the tremendous competitor he used to be. At the end of January, he even destroyed Jimmy Wang Yang in just over a minute. It should be noted that he also had a new theme song, which I found much less serious and intimidating than the first one, personally. Unfortunately, his knee problems will come back, and he won't be able to recover yet. He will be regularly absent because of that and won't even have a match at WrestleMania 25. According to the Wrestling Observer, the feeling among the officials at that time backstage was that Umaga came back without being in good shape, that he was now slower in the ring. On a personal note, I think that when we look at the rare matches he had at the beginning of 2009, in particular one against Triple H, it is not really that obvious. On the other hand, no longer being accompanied by his manager Armando Estrada as before, which gave the impression of seeing a wild beast with his master, and of course having already seen him lose several times, is what changes the most the perception we have of him at that moment, in my humble opinion. Finally, the Samoan will go through all these first months of 2009 without making a real impact, and all of this will lead to what will become his last rivalry in the Federation with CM Punk. The Samoan will attack the Chicago Kid several times, and in particular prevent him from cashing in his Money in the Bank briefcase on Edge, the World Heavyweight Champion. And it will first lead to a clash between the two men at Judgment Day, but especially to a Samoan strap match at the Extreme Rules pay-per-view on June 7th, 2009, which Umaga will lose. It is worth noticing that on the May 22nd, 2009 edition of SmackDown, we had seen him speak English for the first time, when he challenged CM Punk to the Samoan strap match, which was really shocking to see after being used to watch him as an animal straight out of the jungle for several years. In my opinion, it was a mistake to let him talk on the mic, because it made him look more human, more normal in a way, and the whole magic of his character was the fact he was a creature, but nevertheless, it remains a very rare moment. But the big question is, why was this his last rivalry? Unfortunately, it's for a very simple reason that was predictable for several months. He just failed a WWE drug test, and above all, he refuses to go to rehab. Jim Ross says that the Samoan had some trouble dealing with these hard times, that he was addicted, and that Vince McMahon had no choice but to fire him, even if he was a fan of him, because he didn't want to get some help. JR thinks that Umaga was either in denial about his problem, or maybe in his pride, and that he didn't want to look weak by going to rehab. Anyway, after having already been fired in June 2003 by WWE, the Federation parted ways with him once again in June 2009. I think that despite some very good stuff between April 2006 and April 2007, it is still a big waste that the Samoan didn't do more in the company. For example, a World Heavyweight Champion reign would have fitted him very well, I think. But was he ready to stay on top for several years? About that, Jim Ross tells us, "My vision was getting healthy, getting more aware of nutrition, and understanding what he should eat, what he should not eat, how he should train." After his dismissal, Umaga will have a match in Puerto Rico against Mr. Anderson, who we knew in WWE under the name of Mr. Kennedy, at the World Wrestling Council in July. And in November, he will participate in the Hulkamania Tour, a series of shows in Australia set up in the honor of the legend Hulk Hogan. An element that is nevertheless intriguing at that time, according to the journalist Dave Meltzer, is that despite all the problems with the WWE, Umaga apparently had an agreement with Vince McMahon's company to return to the Royal Rumble 2010. What is even crazier is that, according to that rumor, the company did not want its ex-employee to participate in this Hulk Hogan tour, and that it was trying to sabotage it. Well, of course, this must not be considered as an absolute fact, but it still shows that the Samoan was still on the radar of the Federation. Moreover, at that time, Hulk Hogan was trying to bring Umaga to TNA, the rival company, but the Samoan would have told him that he wanted to stay loyal to Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, because they gave him the opportunity in the past to have the best run of his career. A story that is all to his credit. Coming back from these shows in Australia, a funny scene happened on the plane. On that day, Umaga was with the legend Ric Flair, and by chance, the singer Britney Spears was also on the same plane. At one point, she came to introduce herself to them, but it was not to the Nature Boy, but to the Samoan that she spoke, because she recognized him, given that her ex-husband Kevin Federline appeared on Monday Night Raw at the same time that Umaga was there. Do you realize this amazing scene? Britney Spears recognized Umaga and not Ric Flair. Unfortunately, a few days later, on December 4th, 2009, a tragedy will occur. On that day, Umaga was telling his relatives that he felt weird, and for a few days, several people who talked to him on the phone to book him on shows noticed that he was speaking slowly and that his mind seemed to be elsewhere. While his wife went to bed, he ended up falling asleep on the couch in front of the TV. When she returned to see him a few hours later, she will discover that he is no longer breathing and that his nose is bleeding. She is going to call the paramedics who will bring him to the hospital, and even if they manage to get his heart going again on the way, Umaga will have another fatal heart attack. An autopsy will reveal that it was caused by a deadly mix of a painkiller, a muscle relaxer, and an anxiety medication, and that his heart and his liver were already in a bad state. He was only 36 years old and leaves behind his wife and his 4 children who were still young. For the WWE, it is a new tragic death that will be highly publicized, on which the company will defend itself by saying that Umaga had been fired because he refused to be helped. An argument that can cause debate given that they were about to make him come back in 2010 apparently. Even if, of course, we can imagine that tests would have been done beforehand. But as Jim Ross says, this tragedy is a result of bad decisions, and according to him, Umaga had the flaw of trusting everyone. He thinks that for the purchase of his painkillers on the web, he was encouraged by others because he was not the type of guy to go on the internet. Unfortunately, because of this story, WWE will not acknowledge his passing on television and will not induct him into its Hall of Fame either, despite the support campaign that his brother Rikishi launched on Twitter to make it happen. By the way, Rikishi was also in Australia for the Hulkamania tour and says that these 2 weeks he spent there with his brother were the best moments together of their lives. He says Umaga dreamed of the day when he could retire and go see his sons in the NFL, that he was a good person. Here's what he said. Every time he came through those curtains, my brother always brought everything he had, being tired or sick. For his family, this tragedy will of course be very painful. So much so that his wife even thought about committing suicide, because he was everything for her. The Tonga kid, his brother, says about Umaga, "My brother was a good person, a good dad, a good uncle. He shared his blessings. It's sad that he left so early. To this day, it's hard. With him, there was always laughing and joy. A lot has to do with the choices they make, the stuff they eat, the things they do in life, what you're putting in your body. My brother had some issues he was dealing with, but again, I can lead the horse to the water, but I can't make it drink it." He earned the spotlight they give him. In real life, it really seems to be unanimous. The Samoan was a great person. Jim Ross says that he was always smiling, kind and cooperative, that he liked being with him, and that it's really a shame because he was an ideal opponent for babyfaces. Afa, his uncle, will write after this tragedy, "On behalf of my family, the Anoa'i and Fatu family, we are devastated and shocked by the loss of our Eki, our son, nephew, brother, cousin, husband, father. Our hearts are broken, and words can't express what each of us are feeling. It is so comforting to know how loved Eki is by his family, peers, friends, and most of all, his fans. When I received that AM phone call that my nephew was in the hospital, I dug deep and prayed and cried and begged for a miracle. When we lost Eki, I knew it was God's will, and that he is with my sister, his mother, who passed just a year ago. We are making our plans now for our farewell to Eki, but I wanted to take this time to thank everyone for all of the thousands of posts, emails, letters, and cards. Although I have not been able to bring myself to answer them personally, your kindness does not go unnoticed. I want to especially thank our WWE family and Stephanie McMahon for everything. And her phone call was very comforting to me in my time of sorrow. For Vince McMahon too, this tragedy will affect him a lot. The legend Chris Jericho said, "I remember how legit sad Vince was about it, because at the time, I think they had let him go because he wouldn't go to rehab. And I remember Vince really saying like, I tried, I did not want this to happen. I couldn't do anything. Like, if you're not going to do it on your own, there's nothing we can do." Bobby Lashley, the one who faced Umaga at WrestleMania 23, says, "When I heard he passed, it was a numbing feeling. That guy, I'll tell you, was an incredible guy. Always in a good mood. Always had positive things to say. Always joking around. It's hard because when I think about him, it makes me sad that he's not here anymore. But by the same token, anytime I hear his name, it puts a smile on my face because of the person he was." We can see how this is really what comes up the most when colleagues talk about him. The Samoans' love of life. Drew McIntyre says that one time they were supposed to have a dark match together, and that during the day he wanted them to prepare it together, but to do a joke on him, Umaga ignored him all day long. Apparently, Drew was sweating and stressed out for hours backstage because he thought he had pissed off the Samoan. But in the end, 20 minutes before the match, Umaga came to him telling him what they were going to do, and Drew realized that he was someone with whom it was easy to work. One day, he even gave a dog as a gift to his colleague, Tori Wilson. In real life, Umaga even played a major role for the Usos in their WWE career. While the twins were doing office furniture delivery and installation to pay the bills, Umaga came all the way from Houston to Pensacola, Florida, to tell them he gave them one final chance to come with him and start a pro wrestling career. They decided to follow him and leave everything behind. And Jimmy Uso says that their uncle saved their lives. Without him, they would have continued a job that they hated. They had a very special bond, and Umaga was much more than just their uncle in their hearts. He spent a lot of time with them when Rikishi, their father, was on the road. He really had a lot of love for them. On that day, when they left with him in the middle of the night, their lives changed, and they started training at Booker T's school. And what's even crazier and sad is that the day they got signed by the WWE was the same day Umaga passed away. And for the record, the tribal chief Roman Reigns, who is obviously also related to the Samoan Bulldozer, said about him that every time he entered a room, he brightened up the room, that he was a loud and happy person, and that everybody loved him. Jey Uso even paid tribute to his uncle by getting an Umaga tattoo on his leg. And in the Raw of December 5th, 2022, the day after the 13th anniversary of his death, Solo Sikoa, the Usos' little brother, did for the first time his uncle's signature move, the Samoan Spike, and then the Samoan Wrecking Ball to attack Matt Riddle. A beautiful tribute. Umaga's younger son Zilla says that his last moment with his father was a hug after an evening of playing video games together. First SmackDown vs Raw, then Halo. That Umaga told him he would see him tomorrow and that he loved him. His most beautiful memory with him is a day in 2008 when, after a victory of his team at football, Umaga took his son and all his teammates home and let them all have fun. They were able to spend hours in the pool, play games, and even do a little boxing tournament. The passing of his father logically affected Zilla a lot, who felt more and more lost afterwards. He says that he had a big anger in him, that he wanted to fight all the time, and that he got into trouble that drove his mother crazy, who had a breakdown because of that, during which she barely slept and ate. He ended up doing 6 years in jail, something that would have never happened if his father had been alive, as he says. At the end of 2022, Zilla started training to become a wrestler at Booker T's school, who was one of Umaga's great friends. And on July 15, 2023, he had his first match. I must say that he has a tremendous potential, and watching his first match, I think he looked like a star. He was intense, serious, he had a physical presence, charisma, and it was beautiful and emotional to see him pay tribute to his dad when he did the Samoan Spike with the same bandage and the splash. As Booker T said, we could feel his father in the arena, and we hope nothing but the best for him. He is chasing greatness, proudly walking in the footsteps of his dad and honoring his legacy. And for the record, his mother would love to see Zilla against Roman Reigns, the Usos, and Rey Mysterio. Let's hope that it will all happen someday, and that Zilla will be the one to induct his dad into the WWE Hall of Fame, which is also a dream of his. To end this episode on a lighter note, it was impossible not to talk about the beautiful relationship that Umaga had with one of his favorite opponents, Jeff Hardy. About this, Matt, Jeff's brother, says, "Umaga was great. We all ran in the same circle of friends, and him and Jeff, they were best friends. I mean, they loved working together. He would come to Jeff's house. He actually wanted to come to Jeff's house and ride his racetrack. You know, it's pretty famously known that Jeff has a motocross track on his land. And Umaga would come there and ride motorcycles with Jeff, which is so crazy to think about. But he was a great guy, a real sweetheart, but also a legitimate badass as well. A guy who could really kick your butt if he had to get down to it. But he was an amazing worker. He was so good for his size. He was so quick and so explosive, especially for a guy of his size and his strength. It was great working with him. The matches that Jeff Hardy and Umaga had together made an impact on many fans. Whether it was the steel cage match that they had on January 7th, 2008, or the amazing Falls Count Anywhere match they had at One Night Stand the same year. One of my favorite matches, personally. And for Umaga's wife, it is also her husband's favorite match. I think it was absolutely incredible, with the wheel structure where they start in the ring, then go into the crowd, they have a crazy sequence on the stairs to finally arrive at the iconic moment in the parking lot where Jeff does his swanton bomb from the top of a truck on the Samoan. They had a beautiful chemistry, and to me, this match is perhaps the best of their careers for both of them. Everything is summed up by what Jeff once said about him. Every time I pray, I say hello to Umaga, because he was the most special rivalry that I've ever had in the ring, and a good friend. The Falls Count Anywhere match we did was just magic. And this is how our series about the amazing Umaga ends. A superstar who has made an impact on an entire generation of fans, and who deserves to be acknowledged for the incredible performer he was and the special human being he seemed to be. We will remember the epic battles he had with John Cena and Jeff Hardy, among others. How impressive he was, with a unique identity. And all of this makes me have a debate with you. Do you think Umaga should be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame? We invite you to come and give your opinion. It will be interesting to talk about it together in the comments and to share our points of view. We can say that this topic raises a lot of questions. I hope you had a good time watching this video, and I invite you to stay in the paradise of wrestling to look at some other ones. See you right away.
And that's the bottom line, 'cause Stone Cold said so. What?